My name is Claire Devlin, and I was 17 years old the first time I filled out a college application. I did it alone, at 11 p.m. on the family computer in the kitchen, with the screen brightness turned all the way down so nobody would see the light under the door. I deleted it before I went to bed, not because I didn't want to go, because I already knew what my mother would say, and I couldn't afford to hear it one more time. College isn't for people like us, Claire. That's just the way it is. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my Aunt Ruth had already made sure that wasn't true. She'd just been waiting for me to turn 18 to say so. Before I tell you what happened the morning after my birthday, let me take you back to the summer I was 12. Because that's where the story actually starts. Aunt Ruth was my mother's older sister. They were nothing alike. My mother, Carol, moved through the world with her hands out. Not asking exactly, but positioned. Always positioned. For help, for sympathy, for someone else to carry the weight she decided was too heavy. Ruth worked. She was a paralegal for 22 years at a firm in Cincinnati. She drove a 10-year-old Buick, kept a vegetable garden, and owned her house outright by the time she was 51. She never talked about money, but she understood it the way quiet people understand important things, completely and without needing an audience. That summer, Ruth took me for a week. Just me. Not my brother Danny, not my cousin Lexi. Me. We painted her back porch. We made soup from her garden. On the last night, we sat on the steps and she handed me a book, The Opposite of Fate by Amy Tan. I didn't know why she gave it to me then. She said, "Claire, you are the kind of person who notices things. Don't let anyone convince you that makes you too much." I was 12. I thought she was being poetic. She wasn't. Ruth got sick that October. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and quiet the way she did everything. She was gone by February. My mother cried for 3 days, then started talking about the estate. Ruth had a house, a savings account, some bonds. No husband, no children. She would have wanted it to stay in the family, my mother said. She said it like she was being generous, like she was doing Ruth a favor by assuming. What came to us was modest. Some furniture, a small check my mother put toward credit card debt. The house sold quickly. I don't know what happened to that money. I was 12. I didn't know to ask. I just knew that the one person who'd ever handed me a book and said, "You are the kind of person who notices things," was gone. And the world kept moving like she'd never been in it. Between 12 and 17, college became the thing nobody talked about directly, but everyone had an opinion on. My mother's opinion was delivered in layers. First it was, "We'll figure it out when the time comes." Then it was, "Loans are a trap, Claire. You don't want to start your life in debt." Then it was, "Your brother didn't go and he turned out fine." Danny was 24 and working at an auto parts warehouse. He was fine. He was also unhappy, in the specific way that people are unhappy when they stopped expecting more before they ever started. I didn't say that out loud. By junior year, my school counselor Mrs. Patton pulled me aside after class. She'd seen my test scores, she'd seen my essays. She wanted to talk about applications. I told her we couldn't afford it. She said, "Claire, there are scholarships, there are grants, your grades are..." I told her my parents weren't supportive. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she slid a yellow notepad across the desk and told me to write down every school I'd ever thought about. Even once. Even just for a second. I wrote down 4. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket and cried in the car on the way home. Not because it was impossible, because nobody in my house had ever asked me to make that list. The night before my 18th birthday, I stayed up late. Not filling out applications this time, just sitting. My mother had made it clear that 18 meant responsibility. Meaning, if I wanted to stay in the house, I needed to start contributing. Rent, utilities, a portion of groceries. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she delivered all difficult things, like she was reading from a document nobody else had access to. "You're an adult now. That's just how it works." I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the 4 school list I had never thrown away. Still folded, still in the pocket of my junior year jacket, hanging on the back of my door. I thought about Ruth. I thought about the book she gave me, the soup, the back porch steps. I thought about, you are the kind of person who notices things. Then I turned off the light and went to sleep. The call came at 9:14 the next morning. I was eating cereal at the kitchen table. My mother was on her second cup of coffee. My brother had already left for work. My phone showed an unknown number. Cincinnati area code. I almost didn't answer. "Claire Devlin?" "Yes." "My name is Edward Marsh. I'm an attorney in Cincinnati. I was your Aunt Ruth Calloway's estate attorney. Happy birthday, Claire. I've been waiting 6 years to make this call. Are you somewhere you can talk?" My mother looked up from her coffee. I stood up, walked to the back door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me. "I'm somewhere I can talk," I said. Edward Marsh had a calm voice, the kind that comes from delivering important news to people who aren't expecting it. He told me that Ruth had come to his office the summer before she got sick. August, before the diagnosis, before anyone knew. She'd established a trust. Not for the house, not for the furniture. Those things went to the estate, dispersed the way my mother assumed they would be. But Ruth had a separate savings account, one nobody knew about. She'd been building it for 11 years. Since I was born. Since she looked at a baby girl in her sister's arms and decided that baby deserved options. She'd put it in an irrevocable educational trust. Sole beneficiary, Claire Ann Devlin. Accessible, upon her 18th birthday, for qualified educational expenses only. Current value, he said, is $64,000. I sat down on the back porch steps, the same kind of steps where she'd handed me that book. I didn't say anything for a moment. Edward said, "Ruth left a letter. I can read it to you now, or I can send it, whatever you prefer." "Read it," I said. "Please." He cleared his throat. "Claire, by the time you hear this, you're 18. I hope you made a list. I hope you kept it. College is possible. It has always been possible. I made sure. You just had to be old enough to say yes. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't afford. I already paid for what they couldn't imagine. Go, learn something that surprises you. Call the lawyer. He's been waiting. All my love, Ruth." I pressed my hand flat against the wood of the step. Old paint, slightly rough, exactly like hers. "I made a list," I said out loud. Even though she couldn't hear me, I kept it. I went back inside. My mother was still at the table. She looked at my face and set down her coffee. "Who was that?" "Edward Marsh, Aunt Ruth's estate attorney." My mother's expression shifted. Something between confusion and the early warning system of a woman who senses a conversation she didn't plan for. Ruth's attorney? After all this time? What did he want? I sat down across from her. I told her about the trust. I told her about the $64,000. I told her it was for education only, in my name, accessible now. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know about any trust." "I know," I said. "She never told me." I know. That was my sister's money, Claire. Our family's. It's mine, Mom. She made sure of that. My mother stood up. She moved to the counter, put her back to me, stood there with her hands wrapped around her mug. When she turned around, her eyes were wet. But what she said wasn't, "I'm sorry." It wasn't, "I should have believed in you." What she said was, "I could have used that money, Claire. We struggled. You know we struggled." I looked at my mother for a long moment, and I understood something. Ruth must have understood years before me. She hadn't hidden the money to punish my mother. She had hidden it to protect me from her. I called Mrs. Patton that afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. I told her I needed to talk about applications. She was quiet for 1 second. Then she said, "I still have your list." I laughed. A real one. She'd kept it. The yellow notepad page folded in a file with my name on it. She'd kept it for a year and a half because she said she had a feeling I'd call. I enrolled the following fall. Environmental Studies. A state school 3 hours from home. Close enough to visit, far enough to breathe. The trust covered tuition, housing, and books for 3 full years. Edward Marsh helped me apply for a merit scholarship that covered the 4th. I didn't ask my mother for a single dollar. She didn't offer one. She called me 6 weeks into my first semester. I was walking back from the library. The leaves were turning. The air smelled like cold and wood smoke, and something I couldn't name. Something that reminded me without warning of Ruth's soup. My mother said, "How is it?" I said, "It's everything." She was quiet. Then she said, "I didn't know she did that for you." "I know, Mom. I should have." She stopped. I waited. She didn't finish the sentence. Some apologies live their whole life in the pause before the words. I said, "I know, Mom." And I meant it both ways. Ruth couldn't sit with me on my first day of college, but her planning was there. Her 11 years of quiet certainty were there. Her belief in a baby girl she'd looked at and decided this one deserves options. Some people spend their whole life waiting for someone to hand them a door. Ruth didn't hand me a door. She built the whole hallway 12 years before I needed it, without telling a single person who might have taken it apart. If someone in your life ever quietly prepared something for you before you knew you needed it, before you thought to ask, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that the people who love you sometimes do it in ways that take years to arrive, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. The quiet ones always leave the loudest gifts.